Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be talking about day 2 of the Combine, going through cornerback, safety, and finally an offensive position in the tight ends. Now, I'll go ahead and admit to you guys before we get started here, almost all the talk today is going to be about cornerback. There's so many prospects I felt like stood out there. Well, you look at safety and tight ends, not super strong classes, a lot of things we already knew. There's clear guys at the top of these positions, right? Talking about like Tyler Nubin, Brock Bowers. Technically, if you consider Cooper DeJean a safety, then you can throw him in that mix. But I feel like there's a lot that's already kind of solidified there, and not a ton we learned, although there's a couple players who are going to stand out we will talk about. So we're going to focus really hard on cornerback in today's video. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the first guy. And that's going to be Nate Wiggins. He's got to be the first one I talk about on this list. The one good thing this weekend is the 4.28, which was an expectation that he already set with everyone. And it's very impressive. It says a lot about him and his speed, and it shows that he still has a ton of upside. But honestly, I was really disappointed with everything this week. Going from the interview with him where he doesn't even know what to say when he's asked about the Jaguars. I mean, he's lost, doesn't know anything about the defense, still tries to answer the question, gets it wrong. And then you go to the drills on the field, the measurements. I guess I shouldn't even say drills on the field unless, we really want to say that in the sense he didn't get to do them all. He got hurt in his 4.28, so that really blew. But the measurements, I have a little bit of concern there. It's not about the height, right? And keep in mind, you're looking at all this, just want to reiterate, this is not updated yet. I'm going to update it on Monday or maybe Sunday night following the Combine's resolution. So I want to give everyone kind of a fair chance and not be weighted towards one position more so. But Nate Wiggins, look at measurements here. 6'1", 4'10". That's good. That's really good. Like, it's best out of these top contenders, pretty clearly. Weight, 173 pounds. Do you guys know how much Emmanuel Forbes weighed in at? 166. Now, he went very early. He really did. And that was shocking, but it also wasn't because it was Washington. Washington's had a history recently of picking second-round prospects in the first round. That probably won't happen this year, of course, because they're picking number 2, and they have completely different front office, but it's just something they did. You go back to like Jahan Dotson, for example. They make those kinds of picks. So it's really an outlier to me that happened last year. But he just simply doesn't have the size right now as far as like his mass to play at the position outside in a way that I trust him. I mean, he's going to get bullied anytime he goes up against someone who's bigger than Calvin Ridley. I mean, what's he going to do? He can keep up, but the other thing, look at the arm length. Look at the wingspan. Now, this isn't a huge factor for me. It's a little bit of a factor. But these were supposed to be strengths. I mean, you can even see it written in my positives here. Long arms, helping to control the catch point. Well, we were wrong. He doesn't have long arms. He's actually, out of all these guys, the shortest of all these players. And what was interesting, too, and I think this is the biggest disparity I have between 40-yard dash and 10-yard split so far on my board. Nate Wiggins, despite running the fastest 40-yard dash time, I think he had the slowest 10-yard split of every cornerback that I listed. Yeah, closest one is going to be Tyke Smith, who I have as a slot cornerback, and then it's going to be Cam Hart. So that's kind of crazy. And I think that says a lot about his acceleration after that first year. Like, it has to be incredible, right? Because you're going from a 159 to a 428. That just doesn't happen. Like, you would think this number would have to be like a whole 10th faster. So that's impressive. But at the same time, it's a lot of concern with the quick movement then. How explosive is he going to be? And you've seen things on film, and that has to take precedence over this. But there were a lot of red flags that arose from this weekend, especially considering the Jaguars picking him, to where honestly that whole agenda is pretty much dead in the water unless somehow he's there in the second round, and that ain't gonna happen. He's gonna go first round still. A team's gonna say, hey, just put on some weight. You're gonna be really good, and he might be. Like, there's very much the opportunity for that. He's not even 21 years old. Still a ton to work with, but you're going up against complete prospects at the top of this board. So those are my thoughts on Nate Wiggins. He is probably going to go from CB1 to CB5 for me. Maybe CB4, depending on how I have him go up against like Ennis Rakestraw, because those guys are at least kind of close in weight. 10 pounds apart is a bit still, but out of everyone, they're probably the closest. So let's talk now about two complete cornerbacks from the 2024 Scouting Combine. First one's Terrion Arnold. Back to CB1 for me. I feel like when you watched him on the field, he just looked really good. He knew what he was doing. Of course, he didn't land that backflip at the end of the of the drills, but I'm just glad he didn't get injured, quite frankly. Obviously, the big thing, he did not do well on the 40. Ended up running a 4.5. I mean, that's okay though. Like, you're not gonna get killed running a 4.5. And the thing you have to consider with Terrion Arnold is his ability to be shifty, his ability to make the cuts with players. He's instinctual. He's got all these things that he has already to make up for that 4.5. I think if you go over here and you look at 10-yard split, I mean, this isn't elite, but it's still fine. It's much better than what like Nate Wiggins ran. Of course, that's the worst out of the entire class, but still, like he's a shifty player. We see it on film, and we have to acknowledge that. So maybe the top end speed isn't there, but he's still a very, very good prospect because of his athleticism everywhere else. Now, the other thing about Arnold, I thought that stood out because I really wanted to compare like wingspans and arm length and all that among these players. I thought that was interesting, see where they actually are, height, weight. That was the biggest thing for me at the Combine because I said before, I want to compare Nate Wiggins. And I want to compare Terrion Arnold because they're my top two guys right now pretty clearly. And Terrion Arnold, I didn't think he was going to have a longer wingspan, but he sure as heck did. Beat him by 2 inches. Arm length, over an inch longer. Hands are basically the same when you get to this point. I mean, we've seen measurements between the Senior Bowl and the Combine where it can go either way. It could be almost half an inch off. I mean, it's crazy, but like this isn't going to make much of an impact. So pretty much identical. But Terrion Arnold also has the weight on him. He's at a pretty good size right now. I mean, I'd like to see maybe a few more pounds, but it's nothing terrible. Like, I think that's fine. So Arnold, he had a really good week, and I think he goes back to CB1 and stays there for me. But there was another guy who was very close in this race. And you know who that is. It's Quinyon Mitchell. Here's the impressive thing about Quinyon Mitchell. Talk about the 40-yard dash. Nate Wiggins probably put off some weight just to run fast at the 40. I mean, realistically, he probably played a little bit heavier than this. So he goes down to 173 and runs this. Quinyon Mitchell is at, I believe, 195 coming in? Yeah, 195 pounds, okay? And he's even got less height as well, so that's more packed in. He runs half a tenth slower. That's it. And he has the size already for everything. That's all there. I don't think the measurements like necessarily blew anyone out of the water, but the thing is, like, when you're going into the Combine, as long as you're what you said you were, you're doing really good because these schools constantly lie. I mean, look at these numbers. Like, I mean, Terrion's technically sub 6 foot. I mean, it's like, what, a quarter of an inch, roughly? I mean, it's not really much of anything. The Kool-Aid came under it. Rakestraw came under it. And, you got some other players here. Lassiter even. So, I mean, just to come in close to where you're supposed to be is really impressive for the Combine, just because of what the expectations are. But you also consider 10-yard split. You want to talk about explosiveness? He's among the best here. You got a lot of, you got some 1.4s, which is crazy. And it looks like he's far down the list, but this is all 1.5 and then 1.51 where he lands. That's not far off. Like, he is absolutely an explosive cornerback. And it's really good compared with his size and what he's going to bring. He showed out the Senior Bowl. He showed that he is a cornerback that shouldn't be judged just because he played at Toledo. Now he's come into the combine and he's overperformed. I mean, what keeps us from putting him right up there around CB1? There's really just not anything there now. Like, obviously, Kool-Aid couldn't do the drills. There's some concerns with how consistent he is on the field. He really hasn't had the opportunity to separate himself so far. Maybe he does something at the pro day to do that, but I don't think he's higher at this point. You have Ennis Rakestraw, who's coming way from behind. He didn't have a more impressive day. And then you got Nate Wiggins, who ran just slightly faster than him for the 40, but, everything else was really bad. So he's got to be CB2, at least. And for some people, he'll be CB1, and that's fine. I just think that the way Terry and Arnold aced interviews, talked to teams, the fact that he has all this experience playing in different coverages, outside cornerback, inside cornerback, he's a more NFL-ready guy, although Quinyon is not far behind. I think these will be probably the two best cornerbacks from the class. So, really impressed by them. I want to get to my last of the top 5 guys. I'm not going to talk about Kool-Aid much, like I said, because not really much to go off of. He just did measurements, and it was kind of the same as what everyone else got. But Ennis Rakestraw Jr., he's probably going to crack the top 4 now for me, just because of how bad the week was for Nate Wiggins. And then compare that as well with how Rakestraw interviewed. I mean, we watched both those guys' interviews, like, very close to each other, because Jaguars media talked to them, like, pretty similar times, upload stuff on both of them. And you see a clear difference in the way they respond to questions and how they carry themselves. I mean, Nate's just like, I don't know. I don't care almost. Like, I mean, maybe that's a little harsh, but, like, very unimpressive how he responds. Ennis is out here. He knows what they run. He knows stuff about the Jaguars. He's excited. He actually, like, can show a little bit of emotion about it and get fired up. And he had good interviews outside of that too. Like, I think realistically, he might be higher on the board. It's possible. I don't know. I'm going to have to reevaluate it, but those guys are going to be very close to each other. And so Rakestraw might crack that top 4, but it's not necessarily because he's elevated himself a ton. I think he did a little bit for himself with interviews. But it's more so because we just have a big faller this year. So I really liked what I saw from him. Off the field, on the field was kind of just what we expected. We'll see if he does better as pro day. He might. And I think he even talked about that already after the combine. Now, a couple other guys here. Run through, let's do 4 more cornerbacks. I'll talk with one guy I didn't have on my list, but think I should note. Nehemiah Pritchett ran a 4.36, really fast. And I want to note him because Jacksonville's been linked a little bit to him recently, so definitely a name we should keep our eyes on. I mean, last year you look at like Tyler Lacey. That was a player we got linked to a lot early on. He was a 4th-round pick by the team. This can absolutely happen. And Pritchett is at a position of need this year, and we don't know if Jacksonville will get a cornerback in the 1st round or the 2nd, so maybe they get him later. But Pritchett, really fast time, 10-yard split, one of the best there was. Under 150, which is really, really impressive. And then we'll look at size here, just where he came in. Keep in mind, these are going to be updated. He's really low on my board right now because I didn't watch him a ton. But, small hands, I mean, that's a little bit of a concern. But the arm length was solid. I imagine maybe the wingspan number is a little lower than what it actually is. Because when you got long arms, you got a small wingspan. Sometimes maybe you're not stretching out your arms enough. Things can happen like that. But overall, like, solid build. He's 6 foot, 190. That's all good. He does have a lot of experience playing. He is going to come in at 23, so I think Pritchett, it definitely warrants consideration, when you get into that 3rd round kind of range. Now, we'll see where he goes after the combine and when I'm redoing my rankings, but I liked what I saw from him. Now, 3 more guys. 2 of them I really liked, one I didn't. And I feel bad for the one guy I didn't, because it's just been hell for him, and you could probably guess who it is based off that. TJ Tampa is the first guy. He did not run 40 and all that. He didn't do drills, unfortunately, and that really blew, because I really wanted to see that. Like, he had a shot of putting himself into maybe like first round conversations, because the measurements were just incredible for him. So I've got him here right with Jarvis Brown Jr. They're like a couple spots apart on my board. He came in basically 6'1", 189, so he's going to be a little more fluid than we expect with that size. So he's supposed to be, I think, like 200. But hands, I think this might be best in the cornerback class of who I've got scouted. The arm length, over 32 inches. That's really good for cornerback. And the wingspan, I believe, was the best of all these guys. Actually, okay, Cam Hart actually gets him beat out, who we'll talk about here just in a second. But really good. Really good measurements. I liked what I saw. There's a lot there to work with, but the problem is that when you don't do the drills, and I don't know if he had a reason or not. I mean, obviously there is a reason. I just don't know if it's like personal or, I'm injured or whatever it might be, because there's been a lot of players holding out because of injuries. I don't think he did enough to answer questions about athleticism, because he just didn't participate in those drills for, whatever the reason is. So Tampa, I really liked what he did, but he didn't do much. Similar to Michael Hall Jr., who we talked about last episode, but, difference is I don't have as many athletic questions about him. Now, Cam Hart be the next one. We'll look at his size again, because, that was one that obviously stood out. Incredible here. I mean, he's got over 9-inch hands, which is good. 202 pounds, 6'3". He's got 33-inch arms, and his wingspan is almost 79 inches. It's the biggest one of all these players. But in addition to all those things, when he interviewed, what was it? Would have been Thursday? He would have interviewed 2 days ago for me now. He was impressive. He was someone who stood out among the other cornerbacks, did a really good job, goes up there with guys like Terry and Arnold, who is top of that list, but Ennis Rakestraw Jr. as well. He did a hell of a job. And I'm trying to gather exactly what he said. He was talking about how he had a good game against Marvin Harrison Jr. They were asking him questions about that. And the way he talks, it's like, well, that's just my job. Like, I'm not going to get, I don't want to say prideful, but like, he made it sound like this is the expectation. This is how I'm going to play all the time. It's no big deal. This is what is required of me. He knows his job. He wants to play against the best, and he wants to dominate them. And he doesn't want to think about that like, oh, wow, look at me. That's so great. That's the job. That's what he's getting paid for. So I love all that about Cam Hart. Really good stuff. Obviously, like, what are my concerns? The 450 is okay. This is not terrible, right? The 10-yard split is what it is. But it's probably more so age. He's coming in at 23. I prefer to get prospects who are younger. But, this is something you can look at on day 2. It's absolutely someone in consideration at that point. And then you look at the last good thing I want to note about him, the fluidity. I mean, you watched him during drills. He just looked really good. Like, he's able to flip his hips, doesn't have problems with it. He's probably the best combination of size and fluidity in this class that isn't 173 pounds. So, really love the overall build for Cam Hart. There is a ton there to work with, and this would be a really good draft pick for someone, because I think he can compete with players. I think he can do it all. I think he even talked about being able to play inside the slot, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that. So this might be one of your top cornerbacks after that first group of guys. So really good job from Cam Hart. He's going to be a riser on this board, and probably with Kyrie Jackson. That's one name I wasn't going to mention, just because I kind of expected a lot of this. I will say where he really blew me away was probably the 10-yard split. He was among the fastest despite running a 4.5. Of course, that question's Like, what's your long gear? How fast can you go at that point? But still, I think it's all right. Like, he's got the size. He had a really good first year of starting. Problem is the age. He's starting at a really late time, but he could also be a guy that is just a unique circumstance. He's just a unique prospect. And he's going to play really good in the NFL. He's just going to be, almost 25 when he comes in. So that's probably my bigger concern about Kyrie Jackson. The final guy I got to mention, unfortunately, Kina King. Height and weight, it was fine. I mean, that's really about where I expected him. And other people probably had it worse than him. I mean, you look at these numbers, it's like, okay, well, you can put that with the top prospects at this position. The only ones you really can't. I mean, Quignon's almost an inch taller. It's not too huge. And then Nate Wiggins, obviously, way taller. And then you get into some of the guys we just talked about. But, hands, arm length, wingspan, a little bit below what I'm expecting here. But the 40 time, not that good. These opportunities for him to put himself back in the race, he just hasn't done it each time. And I hate it because I really like the player. Like, I want him to succeed really bad, but I can't help but watch him and think of Keely Ringo from last year. It's the same exact stuff. He goes from being a top 5 draft pick, basically, to probably being a third day kind of guy. And we don't even know where in the third day. I mean, it's possible he goes just the same place where Ringo did, where a team trades up in the early third day window and just picks him because there's a ton to work with. And you clearly saw he was incredible in 2022. So there's a lot to work with still, but you also take like what Terry and Arnold said during his interviews, like, talking about working on roofs and stuff. Like, once you fall, you get scared after that. Like, you just can't do that. And Kina King has been down that road for half a year now, it would seem. Not that I think he's scared of running a 4-yard dash, but just the confidence has to be so low. And I hate it because I want him to succeed, but this is where we are. It kills, but I really hope things turn around for him. I just don't know what the opportunity is now. Maybe the Penn State Pro Day, he looks good. That's about all there is left. Team interviews. So I hate it for him, but that just is something you can't ignore at this point. Now, I got one safety I'm going to talk about, and I got one tight end I'm going to talk about. Safety is going to be Cole Bishop. It has to be. This was just shocking. Probably one of the most shocking things we saw yesterday. Because when I thought about Cole Bishop, I thought of, a guy who is instinctual, has an IQ, knows what's going on in the field. He's even got comparisons like Harrison Smith before, and I think those are somewhat justified. But the questions are about the athleticism. Is he going to be limited by his body on the field? Well, Cole Bishop walked out and said, hell no, and he ran a 4.45. So that was great. I mean, I was super happy for him when I saw that. Like, you love to see it from Bishop. And even a 10-yard split, still one of the best. Only, a 100th of a second off the top one in Kalen Bullock. So I really liked what I saw there. He looked good during drills from what I watched. Was a little limited because my stupid TV kept going on and off during it. The app, you watch it through the NFL app on my Xbox, kept crashing the whole time. So I probably missed a few things, but he was really good. Now it's like, what is the question, or what's the concern that keeps him out of the top players? That's going to be my next question to answer when I go and reevaluate him, because he might be, well, let's look at who the safeties are here. I mean, I've got Cooper DeJean as a safety. I might have to change that. But what stops him from being above Cameron Kitchens? Is it possible he goes over him? Just something to think about, because he might be a better player in the NFL. I feel really confident in Cole Bishop as a good starter at the NFL level now. So he's going to be a riser. And if you don't have Cooper DeJean as a safety, well, he's probably going to be, Cole Bishop's going to be safety too. So really loved what I saw there from him. Super happy for him. Good guy to see succeed at the NFL Combine. Then finally, talk about tight end. I'll name two guys here because I know Theo Johnson had a really good day. Ran crazy fast. I mean, you see one of the top 10-yard splits, and then ended up having a 4.57. Now, Devin Culp, just crazy time. But Theo Johnson tested out really well. I'm a little scared of a Penn State tight end, seeing how last year went, of course. No disrespect to Brendan Strange, but he only got 6 catches the whole year, and that's kind of the coaching staff's fault too. Maybe they haven't developed him as well, but it kind of keeps me from where I'd say, yeah, let's draft Theo Johnson, even if we have a need. But for his ability to rise up the board, yeah, I mean he's probably going to do that after this week. And then another guy I really want to watch, Tanner McLaughlin. I've heard stuff about him being a sleeper in this class. I understand it. I honestly have not scouted him out just because, well, I'm a Jaguars fan, and we probably shouldn't draft a tight end this year unless we have a ridiculous steal there. And I don't think Tanner's going to be a steal because I think teams are going to see that. But still, good overall numbers from him. And he might be a sleeper in this class that ends up being an NFL starter and does pretty well. So he stood out as well. But the guy I wanted to talk about probably the most was Jaheim Bell. And I'll just say simply, measurements, looking at them again, looking at the way he performed, thinking about how he's played at the Senior Bowl, I really want to see Jaheim Bell take on a power slot role in the NFL. I think he would be incredible. And something to kind of back that up, he's doing this, he's running a 4.61, right? One of the fastest times here. He tied for third. He's doing this at, let's see, what is the number for his weight? 241 pounds. If he could get down around 225, 230, I think he gets faster. I think he gets really good for playing, in that kind of slot role, but as a heavier guy. And being a very unique kind of pass catcher. You look at the hand size, 10 inches. I think that's the best among tight ends here. 33-inch arm length, 78 and 3/4 wingspan. Compare that to some of our receivers. Well, actually, we only got Marvin Harrison Jr. right now, but it's bigger numbers. There's a lot to work with the length if you say you are now a slot. Because now he's taller than what he should be to play there. And this is kind of the issue with tight end because he's 6'2". It's not ideal length for a tight end. He's too short for what you want there. So if you put him in the slot, that flips. Now he's tall. He's got crazy size. He's fast. He's got huge hands, really good wingspan. What stops him from being a very unique threat on NFL offense? I don't think anything does. That's what I'd want to see with him. I'm still very intrigued by that idea. I'm curious to see what NFL teams do, though, because I'm just a guy that is talking about what they think and doesn't know much more past that. I'm still pretty new to this process. Maybe I'm a little crazy for saying Jaheim Bell should do that, but just my thoughts. I think he would be phenomenal as a slot receiver. So that's what I've got for you guys. Those are all the prospects I want to talk about. Like I said, not much at tight end and safety, although we went over a couple extra guys. We really needed to focus on cornerbacks because this was a huge day to determine if they're going to go cornerback at 17, who's on the board that they would consider. And I think you've got probably, I don't know, at most 4 guys that you consider at 17, probably 3. So we'll see what happens. But we got some really exciting drills today. We've got quarterbacks, we've got running backs, and we got wide receivers. And guess who is going to be one of the coaches for the wide receivers today? None other than Jaguars wide receiver coach Chad Hall. So get excited about that because he's going to get to work with these guys. He's going to get to know them. Maybe with so many players around this time of year, elevating their stock, talking about a Dallas Turner, Terrion Arnold that could sneak in above a player like Rome Odunze maybe, to where he might fall down the board. Chad Hall goes and works with them. And maybe Jacksonville goes and thinks about making a move for a player like that, if they don't get Calvin Ridley or they have a clear need at wide receiver. We know they care about it. We know it is a focus of theirs. Something to watch. All me just, giving some ideas, not like based on a ton of real stuff other than what I said was real, but definitely something to watch today. So enjoy watching those drills. It's going to be a fun day. Can't wait to get measurements, all that stuff. That's all I've got for you. So enjoy your day, and finally, go Jags.